Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Telegraph welcomes you to Jacob Rees-Mogg Brexit Live. Please welcome to the stage Chris Evans, editor of The Telegraph.
Hello. Thank you. Last time I did an introduction like this, I was introducing Boris, whom I must now refer to as the PM. And of course, instead of saying Brexit, I said breakfast. Tonight, I'm introducing a man who's banned his staff from using half the words in the English language. So wish me luck. But I'll be very quick. I, and I'm sure many of us, I'm a great admirer of Jacob. I think of him, and he'll probably hate me for saying this, as a man of style and substance. Style because of his adherence to all these wonderful traditions, the sartorial, the grammatical, and lounging on green leather benches. But substance because he is one of the most articulate and determined advocates of Brexit. And it's both his style and his substance which have won him admirers and adversaries in equal measure. He is a very distinctive politician, and I suspect we're going to find, although we will see, that there are more admirers than adversaries in the audience tonight. So I'm going to get off now. First of all, I'm going to introduce you. He's going to be in conversation with my colleague Chris Hope, whom you saw in the video. So Chris is going to appear any second now and tell you a little bit about what's going to happen tonight, the running order, and I'm going to disappear. But allow me to thank all of you for being Telegraph readers, subscribers, whatever you are, and to reiterate that you're very, very welcome to what I hope will be a marvellous evening. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Christopher Hope, the Chief Political Correspondent of the Daily Telegraph and presenter of Chopper's Brexit podcast. Welcome to Jacob Rees-Mogg on Brexit Live. If you want to tweet about tonight, please use a hashtag #MogLive. Our guest tonight needs very little introduction, certainly not to Telegraph subscribers like yourselves. Since 2010, he's been MP for North East Somerset. He entered the cabinet in July as leader of the House of Commons, and he's a father of 6 children. A recently uncovered video showing him aged 12 promising to be chief executive of GC Marconi by the time he was 30 and prime minister by the age of 70. Well, ladies and gentlemen, he failed at taking over GC Marconi. But as for number 10, he's still only 30 years old. Please welcome Jacob Rees-Mogg. Jacob, good.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, we'll be here until about 9 o'clock tonight when we'll leave promptly, and we'll have 45 minutes of me asking some quick questions with some slides of Jacob's life so far, and then it's over to you for the real big questions, the ones, so hold up all your favourite questions until then. But Jacob, I've been digging through my archive in the Telegraph archive. I found some pictures of you. This is the first one I found. This is you aged 12. Have you got that Vote Maggie badge anymore?
I have still got a Love Maggie badge somewhere around, yes. And I'm glad to see that one of my sons is now permanently wearing a Back Boris badge. So this habit of wearing political badges carries on from one generation to the next.
And you owned 6 shares, didn't you, when aged 12 for this Yorkshire TV programme, GEC. Do you remember the profit you made on the shares you owned?
Oh, gosh, I don't remember. This is now quite a long time ago.
Yes.
I'm rather aged now.
Yes. But you don't remember what they were? No?
I remember some of the companies. Town and City was run by Geoffrey Sterling, Lord Sterling, who I run into periodically in the House of Parliament, and who went on to run P&O, yes. Yeah.
Are you embarrassed by your 12-year-old self saying these things?
Oh, no. Would I prefer that this video hadn't appeared? Yes. But is it deeply embarrassing? No.
And you wanted to be Prime Minister by the time you're 70, and you're 50 now.
Well, I was a great admirer of Ronald Reagan, who became president when he was 70, and was such an amazing and important force for change and for good, not just in the United States, in the world. And if you think of that period in the early 1980s, how well run our country in the United States was, and the phenomenal difference that made to people's living and security. And I think that's why I thought of the age of 70, because of his model.
We're getting older leaders, aren't we? Jeremy Corbyn could be the next Prime Minister, if you're not careful.
Let's hope not.
Well, what advice would you give to your 12-year-old self, Jacob Rees-Mogg?
What advice would I give to my 12-year-old self, or indeed to my children? I would advise them to do what they want to do, and to push for things that they believe in and that they're interested in, and whatever they do, to do it because they think it's important and interesting, not because other people are telling them to, not to follow the crowd.
Here's our next picture. It's your family.
Ah.
Can you name all your children?
I can, yes. Not only can I name all of them, I can name all their names, and they've all got lots of names. So there we have Peter, Mary. I think Thomas is missing. I can't see him. Anselm. Thomas is there. Anselm. Alfred in my arms, slightly hiding behind Nanny's head.
Yes.
With Sixtus on his christening day.
And that's Nanny, of course, holding Sixtus, isn't it?
That's right.
And she cared for you when you were a baby.
Oh, gosh, yes, she still looks after me in so many ways. I mean, what would I do without Nanny?
And is it right you go up and down to the West Country and back with Nanny in the car?
No, Nanny no longer works weekends.
Oh, doesn't she?
No, she has weekends off, you know. We're a fair employer. The trade unions would approve.
I've got to ask, are you planning any more children, or have you drawing it at 6?
Well, Helena's in the audience. We'd better ask her, really. I think 6 is...
That was a no, wasn't it?
Am I being heckled already by Telegraph?
It's your wife, though. It's your wife. But was that a no? Yeah.
I think 6 is probably it.
Okay. And here's your son, Peter, who Peter is here tonight. Hello,
He's
Peter.
also here, yes.
Yes. Does Peter mind? Does he want to be dressed like you, or would you make him do it?
It's entirely up to Peter. I don't make anybody do anything. I do what my children tell me to. I'm a very obedient father. So Peter dresses like me, and my younger sons, actually 2 of them were dressed not so long ago wearing Liverpool football kit. And there was a piece in the Telegraph defending their right to do this, because there'd been a piece in the Liverpool Echo saying how dreadful it was that some old right-winger like me put his children in Liverpool football kit. It was nothing to do with me at all. That's what they wanted to do. I'm in that sense,
yes.
I'll say the word quietly because it's Telegraph readers, I'm quite liberal.
Oh. Do you hear that? Back? Which football team do you support, Jacob?
I don't follow...
Do you follow any sport? Cricket?
Oh, cricket. Yes. And Somerset lost against Hampshire today, which is a great disappointment. Sorry.
Yes, sad, yes. And bit of rugby coming up? Rugby World Cup?
I don't know anything about rugby.
No. You don't keep your children under wraps, and other politicians, Boris Johnson, do. Why is that? Have you made a choice there? Have you asked them if they mind being photographed?
It's passive rather than active, that they've sort of been around and they come with me to things, and it's great fun having them around, and if they're around, then they get photographed. And I'm a great believer in the free press. I think that if you go into public life, then you have sacrificed your and your family's privacy by virtue of doing it. I don't like the encroaching privacy laws that we've got in this country. I think they're not something anybody's ever voted for, and they've come through the human rights legislation. And I believe really in the First Amendment principle they have in the United States, that freedom of the press is absolutely fundamental.
But that trumps the privacy of a child, possibly.
I'm afraid I think freedom of the press trumps almost everything, yes.
And that you're the son, of course, of the editor of a rival newspaper, The Times, aren't you?
Absolutely, no, it's kind of you to mention that.
Yes.
I was just thinking before coming on, my first visit to the Telegraph's building was to watch the royal wedding of the Prince and Princess of Wales, and the Telegraph had its wonderful building
on
Peterborough Court on the Strand, and there was a magnificent view of the carriage procession.
That's right.
Going past, and so my father was invited with all his family to go.
A lovely balcony there, wasn't it?
That's right.
It's now a Goldman Sachs office.
Yes. Shows where power has moved.
Let's move on from there. Now, Jacob, do you like being famous?
Well, famous is such a funny word. I'm a politician, and politics isn't about fame. It's about ideas and getting things done. And I think one ought to be very careful about the overlap between politics and celebrity. Politicians don't want to be celebrities, but by virtue of what they do, they sometimes get well
I only asked that because I found this picture.
Oh.
You're having your hair sprayed.
I am. Ladies and gentlemen, can I give you one piece of advice? Never do what you're told by photographers, because they always cheat. So they told me that I had to they wanted to do photographs in a special way, and it was all going to be like this, and I didn't need to worry. They wouldn't let me down, and so the first thing they do is get some lady to squirt me with this disgusting stuff, and then take a picture of it. So never agree to do silly things you're asked to do by photographers.
On Twitter, I asked for questions, and someone mentioned your hair. It's admired on Twitter. Do you put anything on it? Do you wear product?
Brill cream, no.
Brill cream.
No, of course.
You just brush it in the morning.
I'm the Dennis Compton of I don't do anything like that.
No product. Does the attention phase you? Does it get in the way of, you're a serious politician with serious ideas, but people like to hear what you're going to say? I mean, there's a serious audience here with serious thoughts.
I mean, it is a very interesting question, but if you don't accept a degree of publicity with what you're trying to do, you don't get fantastic Telegraph audiences willing to come and listen to a discussion on political matters. And how do you get your arguments across? How do you get people to read what you're writing or listen to what you're saying if they don't know who you are? And this is surely true daily in your paper. Everybody reads your articles because you've been writing for the Telegraph for some time. They think they know you and that they rely on what you say. Whereas if somebody completely new comes in, it takes time to build up a following. And so it's really important that you are known as a public person in political discourse, but that mustn't overtake the arguments that you're making and drown them out.
I do ask that because you've never sort of gone against yourself, have you? I was really, if I may say so, I was struck by your response to abortion, that question on Good Morning Britain. Would you allow abortion in case of rape or incest? And you said no, because it's against your faith. And I remember thinking, from a lot of politicians, that would be the end of their career, but people accepted what you said as your honestly held opinion.
Well, I think life is fundamental, and that you have to remember in these very difficult cases that there are two lives to be considered, not just one. And once you think about that second life, it must have rights as well. And I think the teaching of the church is not only something I accept because it is the truth, but I accept it because I believe it personally. I believe it is of fundamental importance not to forget that there is a second life and that life is valuable, both at the beginning and at the end.
You're not willing to sacrifice that for your political career or finding a way of saying you're ambivalent towards it? I mean, Tim Farron, the Lib Dem leader, had a real problem with it at the 2017 election, didn't he?
I wasn't intending to get biblical, but what profiteth it a man if he gain the whole world but lose his soul? I cannot think there is any benefit in a political career if you have to sacrifice your views.
When you said that on the sofa and you were going back to the office in the car, did you think, well, I don't know how that will land, that might be difficult?
I
Or
thought
you said a prayer?
No, I thought it wasn't the most popular thing that I had ever said, and that there might be some reaction.
Yes.
And there was.
Yes. Well, talking of reaction, now this is on your doorstep, wasn't it, in August last year? It looks like you're giving the benediction there to a class war activist. Well, were you literally, I mean, Nanny's looking like the Virgin Mary looking up at you, and Helena's like Mary Magdalene to one side, and you've got the Roman guard at the front, and you're forgiving this class war activist, aren't you? Well, you weren't, were you? What were you doing?
To be perfectly honest, I felt rather sorry for him. He is a rather sad, elderly man who has nothing better to do than shout at people. His daughter gave a very sad interview to the Mail on Sunday saying disobliging things about him. It can't be a happy way of life for him. But do I think people should turn up on politicians' doorsteps and shout at them? No, broadly not. I think it's a disagreeable thing to do. My children all thought it was rather funny. They weren't... They weren't upset by it. It
was around tea time, wasn't it? So
it was around tea time, yeah.
He was called Ian Bone, and he said to your children, he said, your daddy is a horrible person. Lots of people don't like your daddy. Do you know that? He probably hasn't told you that. Lots of people hate him. But you're being very generous towards him.
Well, I mean, it's probably true there are lots of people who don't like me. I mean, I'm in public life. I'm a conservative. I'm a Brexiteer. That doesn't mean that everybody in the country thinks that my views are views they would like to hold. And one's got to be realistic about that And don't we all do this, actually? That when you're watching telly and on comes, let me choose an uncontroversial figure, say John McDonnell, you watch him express your views and you think that his personality must be like his views. Actually, to meet him in the lobby of the House of Commons, he's got great charm. He's not an unpleasant person to talk to. His views are dreadful and dangerous and would ruin the country. But I don't think of him as a bad man. And I think when you don't meet people, it's much easier not to make that second part of the argument. And you think people are as bad as their views, and that's the price of being in public life.
Were you unhappy about the invasion of privacy, or have they come back, or have they made their point?
No, they haven't come back. He'd made his point and he went away.
Yeah. Now, this next picture here involves, well, I was last on the stage here with Nigel Farage, and that's Tim Martin from Wetherspoons, and you're laughing at a joke.
That's allowed, isn't it?
Yes, allowed. Yeah, it's allowed. It's allowed.
Yes, yes.
I don't want to be too poke-faced about it. That's perfectly allowed.
Thank you.
When did you first become a Brexiteer, Jacob?
Oh, goodness. I was opposed to the Maastricht Treaty, but I didn't think for a long time that leaving was on the cards politically. I thought that renegotiation was possible and not having further integration. But I think Brexiteers owe a great debt to Nigel Farage. I don't think we would have got to the position of having a referendum without the work that he did, and very lonely work to begin with. He didn't have much support. He was a marginalised political figure. But then people began to realise that the European Union was going very badly
The Lisbon
wrong.
Treaty was a turning point for that.
The Lisbon Treaty and the referendum we were promised and then never had.
By David Cameron.
By David Cameron, but the Constitution was, of course, turned into the Lisbon Treaty to get out of the referendum promise. Then the Euro crisis and the ruination of many European states because of that very misguided policy.
Yes.
And the realization that the European Union was a product for the fat cats, the elites, for the monopolists, for the producer, and not for the consumer or for the voter. And people got fed up with that, and we are a wonderfully democratic, free society. And we hadn't joined the euro.
Yes.
So it was easier for us to make the case against it than some of the other countries.
I asked that because there's a new book out by Michael Ashcroft, your biography, in all good bookshops, and he reported in 2013 that you backed a renegotiation over leaving if faced with a choice, even as recently as 6 years ago.
Yes, and I was very cautious about a referendum. I voted for the referendum in 2011, slightly nervously, because I thought we needed a referendum at the point at which the Conservative Party was committed to leaving, not before. And I thought we needed to do it in a more staged process. The stages weren't what I had expected. But I thought our chance of winning a referendum on leaving was stronger if we did it in stages rather than in one big bang.
On Brexit, do you have more in common with Nigel Farage or Boris Johnson on Brexit?
Well, I have everything in common with Boris Johnson. I'm bound by collective responsibility, but even if I weren't, I find myself in regular agreement with our great leader.
How near we...
Well, no, I'm in the same position, ladies and gentlemen, as all of you. I've been indoctrinated through reading his columns in the Telegraph for decades. How, week after week of that wonderful diet, could I not have come around to his way of thinking?
How near did you get to joining UKIP?
Never.
There were
never,
rumours,
never,
weren't
never.
there, under Cameron you might go.
But they were all entirely fanciful. I was never going to join the Conservative Party is my party. And I was never going to leave it for another party. That it temporarily had people leading it who didn't share all my views was irrelevant. That's often the way. And I've always thought it's important that the Conservative Party is and remains a broad church. There is room within the Conservative Party for people who believe in the European Union, and they should be welcome within it, but we need to deliver on the referendum result as a crucial matter of confidence in public policy.
Well, we'll come on to Brexit. There's a picture there of you both looking quite stern. Can you see it? I think I've known Nigel Farage for about 15 years. I think what he wants, strangely, is to be respected and recognised by the state. Can you ever imagine being in government as a minister in the Lords?
I respect Nigel Farage, as I said earlier, but the honours of the state don't come from me, don't flow from me. But he is a very distinguished political figure and an important contributor to what has happened within this country. He is a significant British statesman.
Is it time he was made a knighthood or got a peerage?
I think what people do is so much more important than the titles that they get given. And if Nigel looks back on his career and thinks that he has changed the polity of the United Kingdom more individually than almost any other individual who has never been in Parliament, I mean a proper Parliament, I don't mean the European Parliament, that must be a much greater reward than being given a title.
Would you call him the most influential Britain on politics in the past 30 years?
Well,
some do call him that.
Who's never been in Parliament?
Yes.
I think you need to look at the parliamentary work, you need to look at things done by people like Bill Cash. The great thing about Bill is he knows all the facts.
Yes.
And ultimately, if you know all the facts, you win the argument. And he has built that up over decades, and I think that is formidably impressive. So there are other figures.
Yes.
So it's not right just to pick on one, but outside Parliament, I think you can pick on.
Do you know how long Bill Cash has been on the European Scrutiny Committee in the House of Commons?
35 years, I think.
Yes, nearly as long as he's been in the European Union.
Yeah.
With this next image, I was actually in front of you, squatting down next to Laura Koonsberg. Do you remember that? That was November last year, wasn't it?
What are all those people doing there?
Yeah, well, you asked them to be there.
Did I? Yes. All right. We were having a party.
We were having a party. This is St Stephen's entrance, for those who don't know it, and you were then announcing that you put your letter in of no confidence in Theresa May, who was Prime Minister at that point.
Yes, and I did that because we had been told that there were many things that she would not do, and that there were various red lines, and then the withdrawal agreement came out, and the Irish backstop was in, which potentially bust up the United Kingdom. I mean, it was so sad, really, that all the things we'd been promised turned out not to happen. And at that point, I'm afraid I lost confidence in her leadership, and it was a confidence I never regained.
Did you go too early, do you think, or will history say it was the right moment to do it?
It's a very difficult question of timing, that there is no good time. The argument that I got as we were doing it was twofold. One was that we were too late, because by then it was too late to change anything, get a new leader and have a new negotiation. And the other, it was too early because the meaningful vote hadn't happened, and therefore her position wasn't.
And March was approaching.
But you were faced with the deadline of March and the idea that you couldn't get somebody in to do the renegotiation, with the vote coming later and later, and the vote was the thing that most undermined confidence and perhaps maximised your chance of winning. Anyway, it didn't work out, and I think in politics things that you try that don't work must be considered to be failures.
Have you seen her since she... Well,
yes, I mean, she's
very friendly to you.
She's very polite. I have a certain sneaking admiration for her. And of course, she gave Geoffrey Boycott a knighthood, for which I would forgive her many things, because as that film showed, thank you, there's one other person who likes Geoffrey Boycott, isn't it? I was a great admirer of his when I was watching cricket as a child.
You voted for Theresa May's deal, didn't you, on the third time of asking?
I did, yes.
Which some Brexiteers haven't forgiven you for, as you might know. No one here, obviously, but...
Well, they're a very forgiving lot, the Brexiteers. My sister's forgiven me. She seems to have coped with this.
She's a Brexit Party MEP.
She is a Brexit Party MEP, a very distinguished one, the most distinguished one, if I may say so. I may be biased, but nonetheless. It was a very difficult decision. The deal hadn't got any better. It was a bad deal. But I'd come to the conclusion that if we didn't accept it, we risked losing Brexit altogether. Because Theresa May had said she would go if it got through, and I thought it could be improved by a new leader, that international treaties are different in substance to the European Union, which is your law, is written into domestic law.
Yes.
And that it was better to accept a bad deal than to risk not leaving at all.
You were given a second chance to get back into government, but the 21 who voted against and gave Jeremy Corbyn the control over the order paper a few weeks ago haven't been allowed back in.
No, I wasn't given a second chance. At no stage did Theresa May make any of her votes confident votes. That would have been open to her to do, but she chose not to do it.
Because she said it was. She didn't say that this is now a confidence vote. Yeah.
That's right. And confidence votes are always different. And the difference in the vote recently was that it was about handing the order paper over to a Marxist. Now, if you're a Conservative, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that is a matter of confidence. Having said that, the 21 includes some very distinguished, very popular, very decent people. And as I was saying earlier, I'm in favour of the Conservative Party being a broad church, so it wasn't an easy decision to make. But I think it had to be made under those circumstances. And you have to bear in mind that we will have an election at some point. I think we need a general election. I think this Parliament is not functioning. And that when that comes, what happens if the Tories have a majority of 10 and there are 21 MPs who still won't back leaving the European Union? Nothing then has changed, to use a former Prime Minister's favourite phrase. But it needs to change, because if it doesn't change, our constitution is gummed up and we're not delivering on the vote of the British people in 2016. So it was a very tough decision, but it was a decision that I think is eminently justified.
Would you vote again for MV3 now, looking back?
Well, fortunately, that's not going to happen because we have an inspired and incisive leader who has said that the agreement is defunct.
Is there a way back in for the 21 if they vote for the Queen's speech, for example?
Look, I think that it is human to err, it is divine to forgive, and the Prime Minister is very close to being divine, I think. I did, when I was living in Hong Kong, I proposed the motion that Margaret Thatcher should be deified in the same basis as Roman emperors were deified. So Boris Johnson next.
Okay. Do you miss your old spot in the House of Commons? Now you're on the front bench?
Yes, I keep on thinking of going to sit back there, because there's a door you can see just sort of behind Martin Vickers. And so I was sort of wandering back to go into the chamber, and I start halfway up the steps, and then I realised I didn't sit there anymore.
And that's your place, isn't it?
That's where I was for 9 years, yes.
9 years. And why do you choose it? You got a good sort of view of the chamber, did you, looking towards John Bercow?
You've got a fantastic view of the chamber, and you don't have to pirouette when you're speaking, because you're speaking towards everybody. Everybody is broadly in front of you.
Well, we'll come on to your sitting arrangements shortly.
All right.
What do you make of John Bercow? He's about to embark on a very, very lucrative lecture tour, by all accounts, the way he's behaving at the moment, anyway.
Well, I think there are many good points of John Bercow. I think that his aim to ensure that the House debates what it wants to hold the government to account, and to be the champion of the backbench is absolutely admirable and has helped Parliament. I think precedent is of overwhelming importance in how Parliament works, and therefore overturning precedent and expressing his own views has been a mistake. So I think we need to look at his service as Speaker in the round, and not just on the bits that we disagree with. I think a lot of it has worked very well, but I think in the last 9 months, the new understanding of the word forthwith was clearly against all precedent. The allowing of a SO24, an emergency debate, to be used to form the basis for legislation, the taking of the timetable away from the government, have been decisions that are not justified by precedent.
Is he biased?
Biased is a harsh word.
He's called biased, isn't he?
Biased is a harsh word.
Who do you want to be next for next Speaker?
But you know, fortunately, I've got to be impartial on this matter, and genuinely so, because as Leader of the House of Commons, it would be wrong for the government to say it should be X or Y, not because that would do them any good, but precisely the reverse. If I said I wanted, I don't know, who can you think of who would be a most... John McDonnell, let's pick on him again. And partly because he isn't going to stand, but if I would say I want John McDonnell to be Speaker, that would be the black spot for John McDonnell, because backbench MPs don't want to appoint a government lackey.
No, fair enough. Now, I did find this picture of you reclining.
Yes.
So,
It's very traditional to sit like that in the House of Commons, it has to be said.
But is it okay on the front bench?
Do you know, in hindsight, I think not. I love the House of Commons. I think the House of Commons is so important in our constitution, and being an MP and representing 70,000 people is the greatest honour anybody could ever have. And sitting comfortably, distracted from the importance of what was going on. And it upset Caroline Lucas, which of course is something one wishes to avoid. And therefore it is better not to have these distractions.
To perhaps explain it to you, you were listening to Dominic Grieve speak, weren't you, over your left shoulder from the back? Is that what you were doing? What were you doing?
I was listening to everybody. I stayed for the whole 3 hours of the debate. It was a very interesting debate. I was simply sitting comfortably. There is no greater explanation. Though I did have a very nice, friendly piece of correspondence from somebody in Canada who pointed out to me that when the chamber was rebuilt after the war damage, Churchill insisted that the table that you can see in the front bench were placed closer together so that people could put their feet on the table.
Yep.
And ministers, until television cameras came into the House, ministers always sat with their feet on the table. And it's of course, the television cameras. And being old-fashioned, I can't say I'd forgotten the cameras were there, but I was just restoring an ancient tradition. But I do accept it was a mistake. I think even some Telegraph readers didn't approve, and they wrote to me saying Nanny wouldn't approve, and we can't upset Nanny. Can we?
But you were awake, weren't you?
Yeah, of course I was awake. I was awake through the whole thing.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
It did prompt the Twitter to go mad.
They were very They were very funny. You've got... I do like the one of the Empire State Building, and I love the one with the Boris teddy bear. But actually, the best one came out today, and I got sent of me on the lectern next to that Luxembourger in place of our Prime Minister.
Just taking it easy. So it wasn't, yes, but you enjoy being leader of the House, don't you? I mean, it's something you've enjoyed.
It's a wonderful role. It's a really important role in this time when Parliament is at the centre of events. And I love being Lord President of the Council because I have the enormous honour of meeting the Queen. And like most people, there is no greater honour or excitement than meeting one's sovereign.
And there you are, delighted to be at number 10. How was it in Balmoral? When was the plot first hatched to get you up there?
Oh, there was no plot, there was a prorogation.
I'm a journalist, they're all called plots.
We don't plot, governments make decisions. We went up with British Airways, the three relevant ministers, so that was me, the Leader of the House of Lords, and the Government Chief Whip, and we had a fantastic journey from Aberdeen Airport into Balmoral because we travelled with the Queen's hairdresser, and I hope it's not too indiscreet to tell you that, who was absolutely charming and full of fascinating stories, which I can't tell you. But,
oh, go on.
No, I can't. I'm not going to. And it was a very interesting...
And you went into the back entrance, didn't you, I think, to avoid the cameras?
We went into the back entrance, but I'm afraid to say I'm not so au fait with Balmoral that I know the difference between the back and the front entrance. So we went in. I wasn't saying, why are we going in this way, I must confess.
And you knew what the script was, and you were with Baroness Evans, weren't you, I think, and the Chief Whip, I think? The
Privy Council is very straightforward. All its meetings are held standing up. The Lord President of the Council, that's currently me, reads out whatever the decision is. And the Queen, Her Majesty, says, approved. And that's all that happens. It's very brief, it's very straightforward. It has been filmed, so this is public information.
Without touching on the legal case, do you worry that you were a proxy for misleading the Queen for the Prime Minister?
Oh, what nonsense, no. Absolute nonsense. I mustn't be dragged into this because of the legal case.
Understood.
But Her Majesty was in no way misled.
Understood, okay. Do you want to be Prime Minister? Once you are in the bookies' list, aren't you? You look very happy there.
I was delighted to go in there, and I have, having spent the last year backing, or since the now Prime Minister resigned as Foreign Secretary, backing him to become leader. I want him to stay on and do a jolly good job. He has my complete support. So no is the answer to that.
No forever or no now?
I want the Prime Minister to remain the Prime Minister. And I was so excited when Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. He has such a clear vision for what he wants to do. He is a very thoughtful, principled person, but he makes politics fun as well. And hasn't the mood of the nation lifted since he took over? Don't we? Yeah. We all now. So I feel that in terms of my own ambition, I've backed the right horse. And he's a fantastic horse, if it's not rude to call the Prime Minister a horse. And I don't want to change that.
Is he red rum or Shergar?
Oh, red rum, surely red rum. He's heroic in the way red rum was heroic.
Well, let's talk about Brexit very quickly. What will Brexit look like?
What
the
will
deal.
Brexit-
What deal are you doing? No one's listening. Come on, you and me talking.
Absolutely. All that matters about Brexit is that we take back control. Everything is democracy. And Brexit is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. The end is better government, is able to have cheaper food, clothing and footwear, control of value-added tax, able to make decisions for ourselves, able to have free ports that can trade with the rest of the world, able to set tax rates, unlike they're trying to get Ireland and £13 billion charged to Google. It's that great freedom, not for politicians, but for the British voter. When we have elections from now on, if you live in a rural constituency like mine and you're a farmer, and you have strong views on agricultural policy, you can vote for a party that will change it. In no election since 1970 has that been true. It didn't matter how you voted if you were a farmer. It was going to be the common agricultural policy, or if you were a fisherman, or if you worked, as I used to do, in the City of London. All the rules got made by somebody else, completely unaccountable. Nothing our government could do, nothing your vote could do. This is so exciting because surely, as a nation, we can make better decisions for ourselves through our democratic processes than somebody from Luxembourg can do, much though I respect people in Luxembourg.
To name a country.
To name one of the continental countries that I think we created.
You could name several others, but you named Luxembourg particularly.
I do, yes. Splendid place.
Will the deal be different to the one that you voted for on MV3? Will it be different enough? Because the ERG won't like that, and you were chairman until just early this month, weren't you?
Look, the Prime Minister has been very clear that it will be a different deal, that the backstop has to go. And he said in his letter that it was primarily the backstop, but not exclusively the backstop, and the political declaration has to be renegotiated. I am very, very confident that the Prime Minister will deliver a deal that is fundamentally different if he can deliver a deal before the 31st of October. So that is the question.
The European Court of Justice jurisdiction, there's no bill, no shadowy committee running the Britain and EU relations. These things are not in there.
Well, the backstop meant that we would have remained run by the European Union until the European Union decided to stop running us, or we could have split up the United Kingdom. That will go.
Will it be an agri backstop covering all of Ireland?
Well, there's a question on the single phytosanitary space, which there is already. Every cow shipped from Scotland to Northern Ireland is checked on arrival in Northern Ireland.
Anyway, now.
I think it would be deliberately obtuse to object to things being agreed that already exist within the United Kingdom, but that it would be wrong to do anything that splits the United Kingdom, and therefore we have to listen very carefully to what the DUP say, who are in a sense the guardians of that flame.
Yes. Do you worry about what might happen? I mean, let's look forward to, say, if there's no deal in October, the October Council, that Parliament might try and revoke Article 50 and stop Brexit altogether, because they're slightly drunk on power there, aren't they, given what they did just earlier this month?
Well, it's very interesting that the leader of the Lib Dems has come out and said that her party's policy is to revoke our departure from the European Union full stop and not bother with a second referendum, just do it, and therefore override the biggest democratic mandate in our history on what inevitably would be a lower democratic mandate. But that's fantastically helpful because it shows their true colours. It shows us that all these people who say they oppose no deal actually mean they oppose Brexit. All these people who say they wanted different arrangements and so on and so forth, they wanted soft Brexit. No, they didn't. They wanted no Brexit. We now know that the Labour Party manifesto in 2017 was a dishonest document. It wanted to do something that they didn't believe in, and they have consistently opposed. You see the hypocrisy of people saying that they insist we don't leave without a deal, but they would never vote for Theresa May's deal. Now, I wouldn't vote for a deal because I thought it was rubbish, and it was better to leave without a deal. But that's not their position. Their position is that anything is better than leaving without a deal. And actually, it's not true. It's about stopping Brexit altogether. So Jo Swinson has refreshingly shown us what the truth of their position is. And we should remember that, and Brexiteers will know, come the next election, that there is only one party that will be able to deliver Brexit, and that is the Conservatives.
Why not prorogue Parliament again after the Queen's speech?
Because I don't think that would be a constitutional approach. I think the constitutional approach is to have a general election. If you look at our periodic constitutional crises, if you go back to the 1830s over reform, if you go back to 1909, the Constitution is always cleared by having a general election. And that would be the right approach now. And then you would get a new Parliament that would be able to deal with these issues that this current Parliament has simply failed to do. But perhaps even more excitingly, you could have a Parliament that could get on with some domestic issues too. Because one of the things I think many of us have noticed and many of us are fed up with is that there's been this period of inertia on every other subject. And that's one of the reasons a new Queen's speech is such a welcome prospect.
But they can do what they like, can't they? You're a majority of minus 43 at the moment.
Oh yeah, the Conservatives don't have a majority. But can they do anything they like? That they can have a vote of no confidence in the government, and that, I'm glad to say, would probably lead to an election, which is what we need and which is what we offered.
Yeah.
And they won't accept it. Now, isn't that odd? Opposition parties don't want an election, and then they accuse us of trying to undermine democracy. What, we're the first party in history that has tried to undermine democracy by offering a general election.
Yes, inarguable. What might you do to get us past October 31st and take Britain out of the EU? Because it's quite hard to see how Boris Johnson, the PM, doesn't break the law to leave by that date, given the requirements set out in the Benn legislation.
Well, first of all, it's possible that there could be a deal. That's obviously the best way.
Okay.
And if there were to be a deal, then we would leave on the 31st of October.
But absent of a deal?
Well, absent of a deal, we'll have to see precisely what the law means.
And that's the wording. You'll look for ways around that. A second letter, veto your own letter.
You're not looking for ways round. You're looking at the detail of the law. Then the law is, in some ways, a blunt instrument. It's not a nuanced instrument. And therefore, you will have to look at precisely what it says and what the Kinnock Amendment means and what the effect of all of that is, and so on. And those decisions will be made in due time.
Because the Kinnock Amendment revitalised MV3, didn't it?
Something that had been voted down 3 times.
Yeah, so it's quite confusing what was Parliament passed at that point.
I think the parliamentary draftsmen probably feel that it is not the most elegant piece of legislation ever to hit the statute book.
Could you just boycott the Commons to say, don't come back, we're out, you know? Couldn't the party be as bold as that? That would give a free pass to Labour. Okay. I'm trying to help here.
No, that's not helpful at all. That would be, never boycott things. You always look ridiculous.
What do you think about the Luxembourgeois PM's behaviour, talking of boycotting?
Who?
The Luxembourg PM.
Oh,
Luxembourgeois, I called him.
Oh, I see, yes. He's called Bottle or something, isn't he? Is that his name?
Xavier Bettel, yeah.
Bettel, yes, Bettel, not Bottle. But it's a matter of, I think, supreme unconcern, I'm afraid, that he did what he did, and the Prime Minister sensibly held his press conference where he could be heard.
Yeah. Now, before we go to the audience, I asked them for some questions on Twitter, and they said there's a very, very quick fire round for you. This is Alexander Brown asked, what's more important, Brexit by October 31st or Somerset winning the county championship?
Oh, wow. That is the hardest question you've fired at me Yes, Peter, I think I'm not going to answer that question.
No.
It's too hard. Let me do the best politician's trick. I would have happily sacrificed the World Cup victory for Somerset winning the county championship and the Ashes, because Somerset have never won the county championship. But I think if you're really going to push me, and my apologies to my eldest son, it's got to be Brexit on the 31st of October.
That hurts.
But that
hurts saying that.
Do you know, before coming on to do these things, you think about all the really difficult questions that you can be asked.
That's the hardest.
And that is the hardest. That is the chin music, as I understand fast bowlers now call it. You are the...
Now, Sarah Vine, Mrs. Michael Gove, asked on Twitter, is it ever acceptable to wear brown shoes?
In Somerset, yes.
Yes. So how far from a major conurbation can you get away with them?
It depends how you define town.
Okay. Matt Mars asked, are spats suitable for dry cleaning?
There is a P.G. Woodhouse book called Young Men in Spats. I don't think a gentleman any longer wears spats. Does that make me horribly modern? But I think that spats are no longer a proper formal attire.
Melanie Riley says, will this level of national ill-tempered discourse ever improve?
Yes, it will. It will improve once we've left. Those of us who are Brexiteers, and one or two in the audience may be this evening, this is the point at which our opponents throw everything at it, because they know they've got 6 weeks left. They know that they will never get this country to rejoin the European Union, ever. Why would we? Without us, it's probably not solvent anyway. It's a disastrous, failed organisation, an economic model that doesn't work, a structure that may have worked in the 50s and 60s but is out of date, doesn't compete with the rest of the world. We would never vote to join it again. So those who love it, the Europhiles, the Ramonas, or whatever you want to call them, are absolutely desperate to keep us in. And they will throw everything at it for 6 weeks. Once we've left, and having left is fact, then it's finished. That's the opportunity for the country, the nation, to come back together, and that's, I genuinely think, what will happen.
Sundar Katwala asks, are there any circumstances in which you would stay in the cabinet if the UK is still a member of the EU on the 1st of November 2019?
Well, we just got into the cabinet. I'm not getting...
Would you flounce out?
I'm not a flouncer. I don't model myself on Lord Heseltine. I think my role is to be one of the staunchest supporters of the Prime Minister. I took the decision to back him very early. He has my complete and utter support, and I will carry on supporting him until he comes to the decision, which always happens, that my service is no longer required. But I hope that's a little bit into the future.
Who's your favourite superhero?
I think it's got to be Batman, played by Bruce Wayne, in the, if that's the right name, in the Pow and Zam and all of that. That was out, and the Batmobile and all of that. Not the films. I could never really be bothered with them, but I was probably too old by the time they came out.
And just final one, how would you like to be remembered was one of the questions on Twitter.
Oh, how would I like to be remembered? I'm not particularly fussed about how I'm remembered, except I hope my children won't forget me too quickly and will pray for my soul.
Now, we've got some time for questions now, just the final 40 minutes. If you put your hands in the air, I'll try and call you as soon as I can. I can't. If you lift the house lights slightly, then we'll be able to see. So just the front of that left there. Yes, please. That gentleman there, please. And say your name, sir, for the audience. Thank you.
My name is Pat Tatton. I'm living in Cambridge, and I'm from Cork. And I wish to congratulate you, Jacob, in having your family here tonight. And I know your family and your wife's side of the family have a deep knowledge of Ireland. And I do believe that Boris should be able to handle the situation in the border talks. I think the Northern Ireland is awful precious. not only to the United Kingdom, but also to the Republic of Ireland, because there's quite a lot of entrepreneurial, material in Northern Ireland that I've found astonishing. And that leads across industry after industry there. So I wish you the very best luck.
Thank you very much. And
the question.
yes, no, thank you for that. And I think Northern Ireland is an essential part of our country. So I think my country is the United Kingdom, and every part of it is of enormous value. Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, and England. And that therefore a government, any government, should always look at the interests of the whole of the United Kingdom, not just the bit that shouts the loudest, not just London, essentially. And so thank you for your question, and the skills we have in Northern Ireland, the benefit we get from Northern Ireland being part of our United Kingdom is, I think, enormous. And it's not just economic, it's also cultural and about the type of nation that we are.
There's a lady in the balcony there, I think it's a turquoise shirt.
Thank you. Hi. Christine Harrison. We've travelled down from Macclesfield in Cheshire. Had the pleasure of listening to you at a Leave Means Leave meeting when you were indeed on the stage with Nigel Farage. You said a little earlier, though, that there would only be one party to vote for, the Tory party, who indeed I voted for all my life. Don't mind admitting that in a public venue. But people are very, very disillusioned, are they not, with what's gone on over the last few years. And I would not want you to be complacent about the anger that is felt, and there has to be a lot of trust regained. So my question is, will you be working with the Brexit Party to try to ensure that actually this Brexit and the values that you both share do get taken forward?
Thank you very much. Do a deal.
I don't think a deal works for the following reason. If we haven't left by the 31st of October, the Brexit Party won't want to do a deal with us. And if we have left by the 31st of October, what is the point of a deal? Because we will have delivered. So I think a deal is one of those things that sounds interesting, but it's very hard to see the circumstances when it would actually apply. Either we've done it and we've succeeded and we're all back together, or we've failed and the Brexit Party is full steam ahead. Should we cooperate with people who have similar views? Well, we all want, Brexit Party and most Conservatives, one big thing, and that is to leave the European Union. And we have to ensure that that is what we manage to do, and that we don't cut off our noses to spite our face. Now, in the European elections, it really didn't matter, because we were going to leave, and nobody much takes an interest in the European Parliament. I mean, I now do, because my sister's there, so I get regular reports about what's going on. But it doesn't have that much effect, particularly as a departing country, on our daily lives. Your choice, ladies and gentlemen, would be, do you vote with heart and emotion for the Brexit Party and let Jeremy Corbyn in? Or do you vote, in spite of all that went wrong over the last 3 years before Boris Johnson became leader, for a reinvigorated Conservative Party that will keep a Marxist out and deliver Brexit? That is the harsh reality that we will face. And I have said earlier the respect I have for Nigel Farage and the important role I think he has played. But we mustn't get carried away with ourselves. If you vote for the Brexit Party in the next general election, it's a vote effectively for Jeremy Corbyn. Think very hard, is that what you want? Or do you want a Prime Minister who is completely committed to delivering Brexit and with a majority would be able to do great things for this country?
Okay. Gentleman at the front here.
My name is John Wilmot from Berkshire. As a businessman, I voted to leave with no deal. I don't think the government's communication has been very good. I cannot understand why the government does not counteract all the scaremongering by giving the general public reason to believe that post-Brexit we will all be okay. The reason companies trade together is to make money. After Brexit, that will be no different. So if costs go up, both sides are free to go elsewhere, if they so wish. And who knows, the US or China may have cheaper options. The world will be our oyster. So the question I've got is, in the 6 weeks we've still got left, could not the government up the game on their communications, public relations, or whatever you want to call it?
I think that's a really important question, and I think you have to bear in mind that something fundamental changed with the change of government. I have, to one extent, gone completely native, and that is in my admiration for the civil service. As Brexit wasn't happening, a lot of us falsely blamed the civil service rather than ministers. But actually, the civil service carry out what ministers want and work extraordinarily hard to do it. Government policy is now to leave and to make a success of it. The previous government's policy was to have a Brexit in name only, and that was dutifully advertised by the civil service, who did a loyal job to the then government. They are now supporting the new government and getting this message across more and more through government communications, through preparations for the 31st of October. The whole machine is moving in favour of that, and it's really impressive, and I think reassures us that Northcote Trevelyan still works and is still effective.
Will these Brexit 50p coins be minted?
I like Britannia on the back of 50p coins. I don't like all this other, I was about to say junk, but I shouldn't say that, should I? All these other, I like proper coins that look like coins rather than these.
Do you need a new rolling up Britannia, do you think, after Brexit?
This has never been a campaign that I have been a particular advocate of. I think we should never do things that are peripheral to the fundamental argument. I think we are so lucky to have a monarchy. I think it makes all the difference to our country. I think it is a bold statement about who we are as a people, and it creates a stability, and we are blessed to have the sovereign that we have. And I think the royal yacht is a secondary issue that may not be beneficial to the monarchy or to the Brexit argument, so I would put it to one side.
Okay. There's a chap there on the balcony.
Lord Smith, I have to disagree, Jacob, with your response to the lady across the hall. I think you will agree that any practical politician knows that to win a general election, you need activists in the constituencies to get out the higher proportion of vote on the day. A large number of the best Tory activists are now supporting the extremely well-organised Brexit Party. Irrespective of Dominic Cummings arrogantly being jealous of Nigel Farage, the father of Brexit, it must be vital for the Tories to attract Brexit Party activists to work for them, along with the brilliant Pericles canvassing app. Now, the Brexiteers need to be united, and Boris needs to bring us together.
Thank you, sir.
Well, first of all, a word in defence of Dominic Cummings, who is one of the most brilliant thinkers and campaigners that I've ever met. And we would not have won the referendum without Dominic Cummings' inspirational leadership of the Vote Leave campaign. We had lots of other things going for us. We had Boris Johnson, we had Michael Gove, and we had Nigel Farage appealing to their respective audiences. But the sheer organisational effort and campaigning effort of Vote Leave was, to a large extent, Dominic Cummings. He is a very brilliant individual, and we are lucky to have him in high office. But the point you make, sir, is a valid one, as I said to the lady. But what do the Brexit Party want? One thing, and that is Brexit. We now have a Conservative leader who shares their attachment to the importance of that one issue. And I absolutely know that Conservative activists voted for the Brexit Party in swathes in the May election. 72% of Conservative voters voted for the Brexit Party. Why? Because they felt let down and we hadn't delivered Brexit. That's why we must deliver Brexit. Uniting us is done by delivering, not by backroom stitch-ups. So deliver Brexit, we all come back together, we win, and yes, the campaigning efforts of Brexiteers will be invaluable. I want my sister to come back to the Conservative Party. I signed her up to it when she was a 5-year-old, so I was very sorry when she left. She's 10 years younger than I am. So,
constituencies that will never vote Tory, which are Leave voters,
Okay.
Bring them to the Tory party.
I'd be very... I don't think there is any psephological evidence that you will get South Shields, for example, a seat that has never voted Tory since 1832, to vote for the Brexit Party.
The argument appears to be that if you went all in for no deal, which is what Nigel Farage is saying with the words clean Brexit, you then get rid of the 12% that go towards him and you have 45% of the polls and a Tory 40-seat majority in the House of Commons. That's the argument that they're referring to.
I think that some of these seats are much easier to win in theory than they are in practice. They have a very long history of voting for another party, regardless of whether that party has represented their interest or not.
And they'll look for any betrayal, won't they, the Brexit Party, and what you end up with. And then they'll use that to pick away at your support in the polls.
There isn't going to be another betrayal. Boris really believes in it, the Prime Minister. It's very hard, isn't it, to stop calling him by his Christian name, but it is most improper. We've all got to get used to saying the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is a convinced Eurosceptic. You have all read his articles for decades. You know that he has exuded Euroscepticism long before it was fashionable. Bear in mind, John Major, according to Andrew Mitchell, tried to keep him off the candidates list because of what he was writing for the Telegraph in the 1990s. He risked his political career at the very beginning by backing Euroscepticism. He is as committed a Eurosceptic as I am or as Bill Cash is. He will deliver for us.
Okay. So, lady there in the fourth row back.
Thank you very much for this brilliant interview. I want to say that I have absolute faith and respect for the Prime Minister and total trust that the Brexit will be delivered and that we will leave on the 31st of October. And thank you also for all your efforts towards that. So my question is to do with, post-conference and post-Brexit and the nature of the Conservative Party. I've been more excited now than I have been for 20 years. You could probably say that the last time I was this excited about being a member of the Conservative Party is, when the Margaret Thatcher
What's your
was
question,
around.
madam?
So the question is, during Lady Thatcher's premiership, we won 4 out of 5 general elections. In the last 20 years, we won 1 out of 5. One of the biggest reasons, in my opinion, is that we had better connection between the associations and central office. Is your opinion, as mine is, that if that connection was properly restored and associations did have more power, we wouldn't have MPs like Sam Mia who get elected and their association never sees them again? Yes. For example, who's, I am aware that he's not one of our
yes.
So
you want more local MPs being chosen by local...
So, would you be for that? Would you be for restoring the power of associations and the better communication between the associations and the central office? Thank you.
I completely and utterly agree. The Conservative Party is built from the grassroots up. My involvement in the Conservative Party was as a ward committee member, as a treasurer, as a vice chairman, as a chairman. I think all the good sense in the Conservative Party is in our associations, and it builds up and passes through to central office, not the other way around, and that associations should be free to choose their own candidates. They should be free to have local candidates or non-local candidates as they see fit. They should have a party conference, which we're going to have this year. This year's party conference, thanks to James Cleverly, is going to be focused on members. Well, that's fantastic. It's not going to be focused on lobbyists and all the stuff that it had with an empty conference hall.
Are you making a speech?
I am, yes. I'm doing Chopper's podcast as well. But I shall be making a speech, I think, on Sunday afternoon in the conference hall. Okay. But it's going to be revolving around the members, and that's absolutely where we should be. And your point on Margaret Thatcher is so powerful. The Tory party wins elections when it believes in things and communicates its belief. When it thinks it has to dress up in the opposition's clothes and pretend to be something that it isn't, the electorate see through that, and we don't do very well.
Do you think that the chairman should be elected by members?
No.
I said, do you think the chairman should be elected by members, and you said no.
No, I think the party chairman should be the right hand of the leader of the party. I think back to the days of Cecil Parkinson and Norman Tebbit and Lord Thornycroft and Kenneth Baker. And the party chairman is there to be the campaigner for the leader. And you don't want to set up a second power base, which is very divisive. Look at the Labour Party, just for a moment, if you can bear to, with Jeremy Corbyn and Tom Watson. And all that does is have different camps fighting each other. So I think an elected party chairman is a mistake.
There's a gentleman at the front here. Yes, you sir, you have a microphone in your hand, yes.
Jacob, good evening. Thank you for coming tonight. Mike Clitheroe, Billericay Conservatives. I had the privilege with my friends of coming to see you at the Palladium. Fantastic performance.
Thank you.
At that time, you actually said that you would not go for May's deal with the backstop. Subsequent to that, we heard reports that you said you consider it if the DUP went against it. That didn't happen. You're the one politician we all trust. Do you not feel guilty now that you voted it on the third time?
Yes, I regret the fact that I voted for it on the third time, not because I think it was wrong, but because there was one piece of information that I didn't have, and that was I believed Mrs. May when she said we would leave on the 29th of March and said it over 100 times. I was naive to have believed that that was the case. And when I came to the conclusion that it was either that deal or not leaving, as I said earlier, I thought that that was the least bad option. But was it an option I'm proud of? No, not for a moment. I did not want to be in that position. And it was a very difficult choice to have to make. And it was... I spoke to my sister about this, Nunziata, now representing the Brexit Party, and she was egging me on not to vote for it. But we did come to the conclusion between us that was rather easier to say outside Parliament rather than inside Parliament. Because if you thought you were casting a vote that might lose us Brexit altogether, did you really want to do that, however much you found swallowing the deal a dinner of bile? And that was the position I was in.
Goodness. Right at the back there, there's a chap in a white shirt on the balcony.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, this is Ben Walker. Jacob, for many people in this room, I suspect Steve Baker may be their second favourite Conservative politician. When do you think we'll see him in a senior ministerial position?
Well, I assume your first favourite Conservative politician is the Prime Minister. So I'm now beginning to feel a bit left out. But Steve and I have worked incredibly closely together through the ERG. He is a brilliant Conservative, a true Conservative, a passionate Conservative, but it is not in my gift to reshuffle the Prime Minister's carefully constructed ministry. So I'm afraid you'll have to get Boris back. The Prime Minister, I did it again. You've got to get the Prime Minister back on one of your events and ask him.
Lady at the front here.
Good evening, and thank God for Jacob Rees-Mogg in Parliament, because you've been such an inspiration. I'd like to hear from Brexit politicians when being interviewed by Laura Kuenssberg and others more about what would happen if we actually remained in the EU. I mean, it looks so horrific. It's going to be such further integration. They will never let us out. And it would be a worse situation than if we'd never had the referendum, in my opinion. So we never hear this from the Remainers either. They never give us predictions of this great future in Europe. And this is an opportunity to be missed, I feel. So what is your opinion about that, and can we emphasize that in the future?
Well, I think we should arrange an interview with you and Laura Kuenssberg straight away so that these points can be made, because it's obviously true that the European Union is pushing forward to further integration. That is what a number of the leading continental politicians want and are pushing for. And so we must be realistic about those changes. It's fascinating talking to some people who backed Remain, believed we should remain in the European Union before the referendum. who now say, well, the EU has changed since we voted to leave, that therefore remaining in it would be remaining in a much more federally orientated organisation. And so, yes, you're absolutely right. We need to remind people of those dangers.
Man at the back there, who's on the microphone. Thank you.
Hi, Jacob. I've got a question about the Constitution.
What's your name, sir?
My name's Andrew. I'm originally from Canada, but I'm also British, and we do have a similar Constitution. If you view constitutional history as the attempt to achieve a balance between the Crown, the Lords, the Commons, government, and common law, do you think we have that balance correct at the moment, or does the Commons have more power than it should?
I'm going to duck that question, I'm afraid, because of the current court case, that it is too close to what is going on within the courts. And I'm afraid that's a sign that the question is very important rather than otherwise. I'm sorry just to give a boycottian forward defensive.
Supreme Court is off limits. The very, very back row here on this ground floor, there's someone with a question.
Susan Collins of Torridge and West Devon. I want to state that Tony Blair never won a 170 majority by a popular vote. A referendum agent wrote to your paper saying that if they had not stood, he would have only got a 30 or 40 seat majority. So something has to be done about that. But the question I ask is, why do people talk so much about the European Union's benefit when there's corpus juris lying in the long grass? I've taxed Geoffrey Cox, my MP, about this several times. And if we somehow or the other, with a Labour Prime Minister, abandoned our legal opt-outs, corpus juris, which was passed by majority vote when Tony Blair abandoned our veto, that reads, there shall be no trial by simple jury nor lay magistrates. Remainers think so highly of the EU when that is hiding in the long grass.
Why are people Remainers, Jacob?
That's a difficult question for me to answer. I can't go through the eccentric thought processes of people who come to such a conclusion. But the thing to bear in mind about the advocates of being in and remaining in the European Union is that they have always known that it led to political union, and they have always known that people wouldn't vote for it. Some of you may remember that the Charter of Fundamental Rights was said to be of no more importance than the Beano. It turned out that it had effect in the UK in the same way as every other member state in relation to European Union law, which has been a growing share of our domestic law. So it was of fundamental importance. We were told we had an opt-out. It wasn't an opt-out at all. It was a piece of window dressing. And so, knowing they can't win elections, they've been bringing in Europe by stealth. That's why they're so shocked by our referendum result, because actually we said no. We won't have this, we're leaving. And that has shattered the confidence of some of the pro-European elites. And jolly good thing too, it was shattered.
Will we pull out of the ECHR as well, which was Manifesto policy at the last election?
The ECHR is different, and I don't think there's any point in fighting on two fronts. Let's get out of the European Union and then think about the further settlement after that.
Yeah. Top left there.
Roger Kendrick,
Roger.
From Beaconsfield, not represented, I might say, by Dominic Grieve. Have we reached a point in this country where the establishment is so powerful that if the country votes for something that the establishment doesn't agree with, we can't expect it to be implemented? And I'm sure you'll say that actually the 31st of October will prove me wrong. But if it doesn't, what can we possibly do about it if we're going to remain a democracy?
I think, sir, your round of applause is thoroughly well deserved, that it is a matter of great concern and should be of concern to all of us. I thought the vote would be accepted and would be implemented. It didn't occur to me in late June 2016 that we would still be discussing this now. I thought we were such a democratic country that the result of votes was just taken. When we lose votes as Conservatives, we say, well, we'll fight the next election, but we accept the result. And that didn't happen. And the Remain side started campaigning in earnest as much after the vote had taken place as before. And the establishment, which is a bit odd for me to criticise, because I am in so many ways quite an establishment figure, but I think that gives me a good understanding of why it's so rotten. The establishment turned out to be much more hostile to Brexit and much more cavalier about our democratic processes. Look at the House of Lords. House of Lords has done everything it can to frustrate Brexit. Dare I mention the British Broadcasting Corporation, which seems to be the quite. And it's the propaganda arm of the European Union. It is quite extraordinary how this happens. And, I just ultimately have confidence that you can trust the people, and they will say again that they want to leave. We will have a general election that will make it clear that we are leaving, and therefore it will all come to pass. But you are right, the establishment is more powerful than I'd expected and more hostile to democracy.
There's a question here at the very front.
Hello, Jacob. Amandeep Singh Bogle, former parliamentary candidate for the Conservative Party. It's great to see the Prime Minister peddling optimism and this government doing everything it can to deliver Brexit, and I think we will deliver Brexit. Today, it was revealed that there are more rupees traded in London than Mumbai and India put together, as are euros, then the EU, as are dollars, than New York. That is a great optimistic scenario. Post-Brexit, what is your optimistic view that Britain should do as the first three things on the 1st of November to compete and beat the European Union?
Mm-hmm.
Three things.
The three things. This was much easier when I was a backbencher because I wasn't bound by collective responsibility, and I'm not really allowed to make government policy on the hoof. So let us talk in broad theoretical terms about where some of the opportunities may be. You mentioned one of them, sir, and that is the competitiveness of the City of London. The City of London has been weighed down, burdened by excess European regulation, by MiFID, AIFMD, and so on, which have existed to make us less competitive. We need to look at the competitiveness of the City of London. We need to look at the duties and the non-tariff barriers we impose on goods coming in from outside the European Union, which raise the price of those goods, primarily to protect inefficient continental European businesses, not to do anything for British businesses. So we want to open up our markets, to make our markets freer as a second thing. And the third thing we need to do, and this is totemic rather than being something that will transform the British economy, is we need to restore our fishing waters. We owe a great debt to the fishing communities. They were deemed a price worth paying to join the European Union, and I think we should pay them the price back.
Okay, lady up there in the balcony.
Hi, good evening. Mr. Rees-Mogg. My name is Celia. I'm a Spanish correspondent. I've been covering British politics for the last 10 years, and I think that you are extremely interesting figure. I follow you in Twitter, Instagram. I hear the Rees-Mogg podcast. Congratulations to you as well. So I kind of political groupie. I would be delighted if one day you could accept my invitation for an interview. Promise no take you to Nando's.
Okay, but any question about Brexit or anything?
Two
really?
questions. First of all, regarding to the law, the key point is not if Mr. Boris Johnson is able to get a deal with Brussels, is if Parliament approve that eventual deal. And it's pretty clear that in case that Parliament doesn't approve the deal, the government, because the law in an unprecedented way, even explain the specific words of the letters that you have to send to Brussels. So in case that there is no deal by the 19th of October, I think you don't have any other option. And my second quick question is, what do you think about Cameron's memories? Among other, he says that Johnson doesn't believe in Brexit. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. You'll be glad to know that my press advisors are here in the audience today, so your request for an interview will have fallen on ears that are listening. So thank you for that and doing it so publicly, and then starting the interview with some very good questions. Come
on, Jacob.
And I'm getting there. Patience. I'm like some old engine. I need to get up steam a bit before I can answer. On the first point, you quite rightly said the law is unprecedented, and therefore it's untested as to how it works, and untested as precisely to what it means, and to what effect it would have, and what the conditionality is, and what would happen to the deal if it were brought back to Parliament. So I think we've got to see how that works out between the 19th and the 31st of October, which is only 12 days. In terms of the Prime Minister never believed in Brexit, I just don't think that's right. I think that's a cynical misunderstanding of the Prime Minister's motives. So many Telegraph readers, as I said earlier, will have read his commentaries over decades, which showed how Eurosceptic he always was, that he saw firsthand the rottenness of the European Union because he worked in Brussels. And therefore he knew what was wrong and knew how it was taking power from the United Kingdom. And the former Prime Minister is actually somebody I've always admired greatly. I think he was a formidably able Prime Minister, a very successful Prime Minister. But there was one area of public policy where I had a fundamental disagreement with him. And I'm sorry about that, because I think he was a good leader. But inevitably, in his book, he is putting his case as best he can.
Of course, Brexiteers thank him for giving the chance to leave the European Union.
I'm deeply grateful to him. I think he will go down in history as a fantastic Prime Minister because he freed the United Kingdom from the shackles of Brexit, of the European Union.
There's a man here.
Hello, Jacob. My name's Andrew. I'm from Kingston, just down the road. Firstly, to thank you so much for being who you are in public life. I've got my 17-year-old son here, and it's great to have an example like you for people like him to kind of look up to, so thank you. A couple of questions, an easy one and perhaps a more difficult one. The easy one is, are you going to start doing your modcast again now that you're in government? And secondly, you talked just now about the establishment, and you perhaps might have some kind of inside track on that. Why do the establishment favour staying in the European Union? What is in it for these people? I don't understand.
Okay, good question.
The first question, the good news is yes, the Modcast will be back. I'm actually doing one live at the Tory party conference, and we only missed the last one because there was confusion, which I thought I was doing it and they thought I wasn't doing it, was the confusion. So that's going to be back. The establishment, do you know, I disagree with the person who called out money. I don't think it's money, I think it's power. And I think that they know better than us, and that they've had a quite comfortable time of telling us what to do. And it's absolutely fascinating. You see, governments routinely got things agreed at the European level that they knew they couldn't get a democratic mandate for at home. So all these regulations that came through to do difficult things that were just slightly annoying, not fundamental, but whether they were light bulbs or vacuum cleaners or any of those sorts of things, they just made life a little bit harder. They knew that if they stood on election platforms and said, I'm going to stop you buying usable light bulbs, we'd have all said, no, well, we're not voting for you then. So they said, oh, we're so sorry. It's not our fault. Brussels has insisted upon it. Then turns out they voted for it in the Council of Ministers.
Or even not voting for it because...
Or even let it go through without having a formal vote. And I think that was the problem with the EU. It was really, really easy for politicians to rule without referring back to voters. And I much prefer referring back to voters because actually if this country were ruled by Telegraph readers, wow, what a powerhouse we would be.
Okay. You sit on the balcony, thank you.
My name's Paul Daniels. I was a food importer prior to the EEC, prior to our joining the EEC. We imported fruit, fish, meat and vegetables from 36 countries around the world. And I can tell you categorically that it was far better then. We had a much bigger choice and much better prices. And I'm still a businessman, and I'm very much looking forward to the opportunities.
Okay, what's your question, sir, please?
The question is, Do you agree with me? Do you agree that business will overcome the problems? Necessity is the mother of invention, and there's no greater country in the world than the United Kingdom in inventing products and trade.
Oh, absolutely. I know it's nice and polite to be modest, but let's for once be immodest and recognise the United Kingdom is the greatest country in the world, without doubt. Look, I like and admire the United States hugely, but all the best things about it, they borrowed from us. I'm absolutely serious. Their constitution is modelled on our constitution. Their Bill of Rights is taken from our Bill of Rights. Did you know the article on bearing arms is a direct lift from our 1688-89 Bill of Rights? Ours says that we must have the right to bear arms for the maintenance of a Protestant militia. And they've taken out the word Protestant, which relieves me, because it'd be a bit difficult. So, we are the most amazing country with incredible global reach and influence, and a wonderful country to live in. Why on earth would anyone want to live anywhere else? Thank heavens. And on your question of our trading ability, now I got a bossy note from fact checkers at the BBC because I had said that at Southampton goods were cleared within 10 seconds. And they got in touch with me and said, "How do you know this? Where have you got this figure from?" And I looked it up. And I'm sorry to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I had made a mistake. It wasn't 10 seconds, it was 6 seconds. And my source was the head of HMRC giving evidence to a parliamentary select committee. So I sent this back to the BBC fact checkers. Do you know, I never heard from them again.
Very keen young man at the front here.
Hi, Jacob. My name is Henry Bishop. Just a very brief question. So I'm a bit like you, which is a bit sort of not very normal for people of my age. I'm only 23. I'm a Conservative. I'm a Brexiteer. I'm also a Catholic as well. And I increasingly find that people of my age, it's very hard to express our views on a daily basis. And I often find people like us are vilified, or we're sort of labelled things that we're really not. And my only question to you is, because obviously you were that age as well, and you probably thought what I did, what would your advice be to someone like me in sort of, obviously, time at the moment, what would your advice be to someone like me?
Oh, my advice is stick to your views, argue for your views, and you suddenly discover as you get to 40 that everybody's to come round to your way of thinking.
You're only 20 years old.
I know, you've got a bit of time. But the other thing, and I think it is harder for you than it was for me, I think the left really hates freedom of speech. And I think this is one of the great worries. How many journalists did Keir Starmer prosecute?
Oh, with phone hacking?
Yeah. And how many were found guilty?
50 and zero?
0 found guilty.
Yeah.
I mean, this was an attack on the press.
When he was DPP.
When he was Director of Public Prosecutions, he led, effectively, a witch hunt against journalists. And they had dawn raids and all that went with it. 0 in the end found guilty. I think there was one conviction that was overturned on appeal, if I remember rightly. The left doesn't like freedom of speech. Why? Because it catches out their failures and the fact that socialism doesn't work, wherever it's tried in the world. And those of us who are broadly on the right, the greatest liberty that we must protect is freedom of speech. Because without that, democracy won't work, because we won't know what the evidence is on which to base our vote. We will lose the rule of law because we will be corrupted, and we will lose property rights because we will have a socialist government that steals our property. Freedom of speech is fundamental, so I really encourage you to make the effort to express your views, and all of us to do the same, because that is what our liberties depend on, and thank heavens for the Telegraph and other papers that uphold freedom of speech so vigorously.
Thank you. One more question.
One more question.
Last question, halfway back on the left, is of someone with a hand in the air. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Tom. Live in London at the moment, previously from the Northwest. My question, I'm slightly worried I'm in a minority here. My question is that the Prime Minister has twice chosen the option of death over the other option. Once, do or die, second, in a ditch. Is Brexit really worth anybody's risk of death?
Who said yes?
No, of course not. But one of the Prime Minister's great qualities is that when he says something, you always understand what he has said. He always says it clearly, pithily, and uses language that other politicians shy away from in their wrappings of euphemism and evasion and prestidigitation. And I'm glad to say that the Prime Minister doesn't need any of that, but sometimes it's clearer than you may wish.
I think they were trying to spell it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 9 o'clock. That's your lot. Thank you for listening and for coming. This week's Chopper's Breakfast podcast has Ian Duncan-Smith and Bill Cash. Please tune in. But please thank Jacob Rees-Mogg.